Hello, everyone. We have another review here. This is completely unscripted, mind you, but it's something I've been meaning to do for a while because, well, let's just say it's had its reputation kind of sauntered for a while. If you haven't gotten it by the title, and if you're one of those people, don't worry, we'll get to you. Um, but for everybody else, this is an anime review. And what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? So we're talking about RWBY. What exactly is RWBY in that case? Well, RWBY, or red, white, black, yellow, as is the color code, is a 3D anime that was made by Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth is a company who originally was founded on the idea of making games, being dudes being bros, and basically playing video games for entertainment, which, to be honest, was most of my childhood for the most part. And I say childhood, more like teenage years. And I spent a lot of time watching their videos, watching their not let's plays, but more of their Minecraft series. That was the big one at the time, and I think it's still going on. But that was that for a while, and then eventually down the line, they had released the Red trailer, which it's basically a character trailer for one of the main characters of the main cast of RWBY, and it was made by the late Monte who was a big animator who was really good at his job. And I guess at one point he had wanted to develop his own thing and not use pre-rendered assets. I say pre-rendered, using assets from other games and other media and just making his own thing. And that's what RWBY became. Eventually there was white, black, and then finally yellow before the release of the first episode. And I can't believe I have to fucking say this, but I have been following RWBY since its first inception, when it first dropped all those years ago. I have dug myself out of that hole, and that's a hole I never want to go back into again. There's a very good reason for that, and that's what we're here to talk about. That's why this is here. This whole blank screen is just to kind of give you footage to work with. RWBY was a 3D animation at the time, which had a unique premise. That's been retconned, by the way. Thanks, Rooster Teeth. It was a society of open monster hunters and academies that trained those hunters to handle these creatures called the Grimm, which were creatures that used negative emotions and had different variants, different sizes, and they were very, very dangerous things. Well, during that time, the huntresses and hunters, they would be trained at these academies for like almost 4 years, like a college of sorts, before being sent off to the wild to go kill them. Well, in this ever-growing cycle, RWBY, who's our main character, who's in the very first fucking episode, is one of these soon-to-be huntresses who joins this academy. And it had this unique premise of all the weapons had multi-functions. You had people who had semblances, auras, which were basically human shields in a sense. You had semblances, which are almost like special abilities for specific people. And you also had the faunus. They don't really matter. They never have, nor will they. It had this unique premise that really peaked by volume 3, because that's when the animation, that's when the story, that's where everything just kind of peaked. And then it went downhill. What does that mean? Oh, we're gonna learn. We're gonna learn today, kids. And what is my relationship to this show? Why should you, the viewer, even care what comes through this stupid mouth of mine? Well, if you must know, I used to be a big writer for the fan fiction side. It was terrible. Terrible to the point that I had to rewrite it. And once I did, felt better about myself. And that's what also got me into writing as a whole, to where now I have my own fantasy novel and science fiction novel that I'm working on that are my own properties. They're inspired by certain other projects. But in a way, I do thank RWBY because it got me into writing as a whole. And it's a genuine topic, a genuine thing that I enjoy, that I want to experience more of. This is where we start to run into the issue with RWBY. And, how do I put this? You're allowed to criticize things because that's how criticism works. And even if it's good or bad, you can still criticize that thing, because criticism is critiquing that material and making your own opinion. Because guess what? And you know who you are. If you're watching this video, you're allowed to critique things. And no, I will not be silenced about it. Why do you think it's called the Fallen Fandom? And it went from a halfway decent show with a decent premise, and it went off this original premise that magic wasn't a thing, and then it got retconned, and magic was a thing, and then there was the maidens, and then there was a bunch of other things, and people are shooting guns outside. Good to know. It seems they found me. And the writing is what I can best describe as juvenile, if that makes sense to you at all. It's writing that's terrible, just like Final Fantasy VIII right over there. It's on retrospect, it's kind of a shitty story, and that's okay because I liked the game, but it's still a shitty story, and that doesn't excuse it. And with that shitty writing came a lot of problems that were born out of it. I was... How do I put this in a way that makes sense? I was part of one of the largest groups on Facebook at the time that would basically over, at this point, almost 500,000 people. And I was one of them who actually enjoyed it. I communicated with the the community. I was very well, deeply invested into it. And here's the thing with RWBY. RWBY has a lot of characters. A lot. What does that mean to you? It means a weird thing to me, but RWBY has, if you're familiar with the phrase shipping, this should all make sense to you. For the uneducated, shipping is essentially taking two characters from a show and putting them together in a romantic sense. There's almost 100 characters in this show. I think a little more at this point. I don't know. Let me see what Google says. Google was not helpful in this case. But my point being is there's a lot of characters in the show. And people put together for whatever reasons. And people got attached to the show really, really quickly because of those ships. And the writers of the show were very cognizant of it. They still are. And they recently made something very, very official. If you know, you know. They had a little joke in like volume 2 where the main characters are fighting a mech or some shit. And they're all calling out like the ship names or some shit. And from there, that's what really kicked it off, because the writers were aware. And I thought it was a joke at the time. In fact, I thought it was funny. And clearly, not a lot of people did. They thought it was serious. If you know who you are, you know who you are. There are some fans, like myself at the time, who was just chill, that relaxed, had a good time, because it's a show. But I also disassociated myself from the show as a whole, because the further along it went, the worse the writing got, the worse the character motivations got, the worse the main cast was, and the worse that the company was as a whole. And it went on and on and on, to the point where the most recent volume 9, this thing has been going on for 9 years at this point. Actually longer than 9 years, almost over a decade at this point. It has not kept my interest. I watched up to Volume 8. I have seen clips of Volume 9. And then I have a Twitter. A mistake, I know. But it gets me insight into certain things. As do I have a YouTube, which is this is what you're watching this on, where I see the fandom making against YouTubers for criticizing their show. Most importantly, Moist Critical, which that man's a saint. My God, my man's a saint. He's just criticizing a show and says, hey, I preferred it back when Monty did it. And that's when people lost their fucking mind. If I should give some context into who Monty is, for those not aware. Monty was the creator of the show, and he had gone on for a while. He mostly animated the fight scenes. He didn't really have anything to do with the story. Yeah, he'd interject characters and stuff, and he'd do his own thing, but Monty was like one of the hardest workers at Rooster Teeth before he unfortunately passed away due to a complication in the hospital. So with that being said, I'm placing a disclaimer here. YouTube, I know you're fucking listening. This is meant to be in a critical light. This is not meant to be an attack against the man who's dead, because that's exactly what they do. The fandom, at least some of them, the more toxic ones, use Monty's death as a way to gatekeep people from criticizing the show as a whole. I want you to put that into perspective, how fucked up that is. That they do this, and there's no consequence for it. In fact, they're emboldened by their actions. They're pieces of shit. That's what they are, and I have no qualms about saying that. It has a lot of issues, and like I said, let's break down those issues into easily consumable bites for the general audience, right? First things first, the writing. Now, I'm not the best writer, God no. I'm fucking terrible at it. In fact, my previous works have been questionable, but I have learned to improve over the years. I have read other authors' works. I've taken even courses. I've studied different material. The whole point of me talking about this is that I'm hammering the point that I have physically improved over time. And my writing doesn't look like hot fucking garbage like most people would assume, right? Well, it seems RWBY got the opposite message in this regard. And they continuously go down in writing quality. And it mostly shines in the character interactions. What does that even mean? Well, when it comes to the character interactions, especially in the main cast, there's a scene in Volume 9 that I watched where one of the main characters, they're basically, cut a long story short, they're in an alternate dimension where time kind of is weird, where one of the main characters grows older by 20 years or something. He's a more jaded version of himself. And to cope with, he's been in this place for 20 years before the main cast fell down and met with him, right? Well, during this time, he met with these imaginary creatures. I say imaginary, they're actually physically there, but and then he started naming them off of the people that he knew back in the real world. And when he mentions that to to the main cast, they look at him with genuine disgust and dude, that's fucking creepy. Why? If you were in that situation, if you or I were in that situation, you'd want to have some way to speak to your friends even through a proxy. In this case, these imaginary little star people who, good to see you again. No, you're not really Billy, but I'm using you as that kind of way. It's the same thing you would do with an imaginary object, right? You'd call it a pet name. And the fact that they're disgusted and they don't feel pity towards him, they don't feel remorse and think, oh my God, this is fucking depressing. Who wrote that and who thought it was a good idea? Also, the concept of death. Yes, from a writer's perspective. What does that mean, a concept of death? Oh, allow me to enlighten you from a writer's perspective, right? RWBY doesn't understand what that means. They killed a character in season 3, right? And then 4 seasons later, when we had almost forgotten about her, right? She just shows up out of the blue. Hey, by the way, I'm alive. Why? What? Why? Okay, I guess people don't die. And I think by season 8, yep, because season 8 was the following season, they had brought her, they had killed her again, right? And turned her into a proper human. And then all of a sudden, they killed her again. What does death even mean? The characters are never in danger, especially the main cast. What if there's no semblance of danger in certain situations? Why should I care what these characters do? Oh, I defeated a big old Grim. I used my super awesome scythe and I killed them. Why should I care when death has no permanence and that, hey, I can accidentally fuck up and die during this time? You see what I mean? Do you see where I'm getting at? Do you see, viewers, right? It doesn't make sense. It never has, never will. And it bothers me to such an extent that I just can't pay attention to the show. And with certain character interactions, they just make it worse, right? There's the whole arc of season 7, also kind of bad about this. I know I'm kind of sidelining, but it'll make sense when I put it together, right? There's this main character, General Ironwood, who has single-handedly been leading the effort against the Grimm because these CCT towers or some shit have basically cut off global communications. And he's been leading the one-man, not one-man assault, but he's been leading the effort to stop the Grimm. Well, when Team RWBY finally gets to this place to talk to this general, he's elated to see them. He's like, oh, great, you guys are here. You can help me. And that's what he does. He extends them that trust. He gives them Huntress official license. And he gives them new tools, new guns, new teammates. He gives them everything that they need. And all he asks is, hey, just help me out, all right? Don't betray my trust. So what does Team RWBY do? They betray his trust. Now you might think, oh, they might have a genuine reason to betray his trust. No, there is no reason. Maybe he might have done something wacky tobacky. I don't remember exactly, because I have to rewatch the season, and I don't want to put myself through that pain. But it was some bullshit, arbitrary reason why they betrayed him. And then by season 8, he goes to straight villain mode. Just all of a sudden. And they try to portray this man who's been fighting for fucking almost 5 seasons by this point, against the Grimm, has been taking this mental toll, who's all of a sudden a villain over the course of 1 season. Do you think that's fair from a writing perspective? No, it's not. It's kind of fucking terrible, and you know it is. RWBY writers, Miles, you know who you are. And it bothers me because he is far from the only character that has this issue. There's other ones I could go into, but you get my point. It's frustrating because I love this show, and in some aspects it does things really, really well. And then all of a sudden, nah, just kidding. In fact, one of the biggest twists, this is spoilers, by the way. I mean, this whole video has been fucking spoilers, but I'm just adding this. There's, at one point, they explain the backstory between the two, with the big bad, right? This big bad who basically, and this circles back to the permanence of death thing, right? Where her boy toy dies, okay? All right, and she brings him to the gods to hey, he's dead. Can you revive him, please? And they're like, no, he's dead. Relax. So she goes above and beyond to the other. So there's a god of light and a god of death or some shit. She goes to the god of death and it's like, hey, yeah, can you fix him? And it's like, oh yeah, no problem. And then the god of light finds out and they start throwing a hissy fit. And they basically, she can't die. She's immortal or some shit. And she throws a one-woman hissy fit and dooms the world to destruction because they wouldn't revive her boy toy. This is a major character, by the way. Why would I care if you're just gonna ignore death? The world building. It's kind of trash. One particular aspect of that bothers me, and that is the faunus. What is the faunus? Why should you care? You shouldn't, because the writers don't either, and neither does the world building. The faunus are basically, they're furries, all right? They're people who happen to have animal features, whether that be, you know, horns or, you know, tail or some shit or whatever, you know. Okay, cool. You know, you're a half animal, part animal, part mostly human. Okay, cool. But the show likes to portray the faunus as these discriminated subspecies who is hated by humanity, and they don't really show that. I don't think there's a single scene in the show that really emphasizes that, hey, they're really fucking discriminated against. If you wanted to show that, you would have shown multiple scenes over the course of multiple seasons of human, and just basic things too, right? Like slurs. Hey, you can drink from this fountain. I can't think of the fucking phrase. Post me. Find me the phrase where, hey, you'll drink from one water fountain, you'll drink from another. That kind of shit. Like, you could show these intimate scenes of racism to make me feel for the plight of the faunus. In fact, the show even goes to this point of the faunus having a terrorist group called the White Fang that basically just, hey, we want to fight against the humans, and because they're discriminatory, they're bad people, and the White Fang was once peaceful, but then a militant leader decided to take over, and now it's a terrorist group. And they show the White Fang as like one of the villains, like almost a side villain of a sort, and it doesn't hit, if that makes sense. The whole White Fang thing is just pathetic. Like, hey, the faunus are discriminated against. They're bad, you know, they're evil people, but they don't really show it. In fact, it's never really shown. They just brought it in there just to say that they had some sort of racism, but they really didn't have racism. It's like the poor man's racism. I keep saying that word, and YouTube's gonna demonetize me. Thanks, YouTube, by the way. And one of the main characters is a faunus that's discovered like by season 1. The only other character is this Rich Harris. I hate the faunus. They're like dirty, evil creatures or some shit. And this other girl's like, no, they're only discriminated against. And like, it's like, and then she accidentally reveals herself as a faunus, and then she runs away. And then by the end of season 1, it's resolved, and they just treat her like a normal person. And then I think season 5 or season 4, I don't remember which one, where she takes off her little bow that hides her cat ears or some shit, and she just never wears it again. Like, oh yeah, let me get rid of the most like iconic character feature. And like, they want to portray this girl as, hey, I'm discriminated against, but I actually don't show any scenes of discrimination. That's another problem that RWBY has that's never addressed. And it bothers the fuck out of me, because if you want to show those scenes, you build them up over the course of a couple seasons, right? Like season 1, season 2, season 3, and so on. And you want to have those scenes kind of laid out, and just like in the background, or just in the way that characters talk, or in the way that things are played out, right? If it's a part of the world, you want it as part of the natural world building, right? As you normally would. But that never happens. In fact, it's kind of terrible in the way that it's explained. Like, one of the primary antagonists of the White Fang, the only time you see any real, like, discrimination is this. So this guy, he always wears a mask. And by the end, he takes off his mask. He shows he's, like, branded over one of his eyes by, like, the corporation who hurt him. But they don't show any of it. It's hints into it. They don't give any real context to any of the events. So I'm supposed to feel bad for this guy who's had discrimination. I'm supposed to feel bad for this girl who's had discrimination throughout her life, but it's never shown on screen, right? You see where that lies in an issue. And finally, let's talk about part of the reason why we're here. The fandom. Because holy fuck, they're bad. They're really, really, really bad. Now, for those who actually, you know, are chilled, relaxed, who, you know how to have a good time, know how to take a joke, know how to take criticism, this isn't for you. I respect you as a viewer, as a customer, because that's what you are, right? You're allowed to criticize things. You're allowed to laugh at something, take a good joke. Haha, fuck you, Final Fantasy VIII, you asshole. I still like the game, you know? There's still some games that I genuinely enjoy that I have problems with, because that's what criticism is. And the fandom is only emboldened by their actions. I kind of touched on it in a little bit, but the idea behind it is that their characters are... They have this obsession with the characters. Certain characters like Blake, like Liang, who now, I think, bi-officially, by the actual anime, that they're a couple now, which... Oh, it's nine volumes of building up this relationship that was not even really confirmed. It was more of, oh, hey, we're gonna include this. Why should I care? And it was just more for the fan fiction writers to go fucking wild. Like I said, I used to be one. And no, I wasn't that type of fan fiction writer. I was more of an OC guy who made his own thing. But that's besides the point. And the same thing with Weiss and RWBY. They'd always ship them together, even though there's no evidence to support that for the contrary. And it would continue on and on and on, and they were emboldened. And anybody who would dare criticize the show, right, like myself, which they're probably gonna, you know, crucify me and take my words out of context, but that doesn't excuse your bad writing, show. No, it doesn't. And it's they attack almost like a mob mentality against anyone who would criticize their show and call it bad or call it whatever you want. And it continues to embolden them. Like I said, they use the creator Monty Oom's death as a crutch to basically say, oh, or he's dead, you can't criticize the dead man's work, which is bullshit, by the way. Otherwise, I couldn't criticize Shakespeare, the egalitarian fuck. Or the show's still ongoing, or X reason. Like, I can't criticize the show for whatever reason. Like, that would stop me. Okay? It doesn't happen. And it's a show that I myself, I think by the end of season 3 is kind of where my peak of it was. Beyond that, I didn't really involve myself into the community anymore. I kind of pulled myself out. I, stopped posting anything. I stopped doing this. I stopped doing that. I just wanted to do my own thing now because I thought the show kind of sucks. And yeah, I'll still watch it just to see where the story goes, but I disconnected myself from the Facebook group, the fandom, whatever it may be, and I just let it go. As much as I, like something, I can't involve myself into something that is so genuinely toxic. It's even outshined by somebody who made an entire fan fiction with character motivations, with nations, with all sorts of new things. I can't remember what it was. Post me, find out what that was. they made everything about it better, and they gave better motivation, and then he just stopped for obvious reasons. Because he was just tired and sick of it. And Hero High, Vexed Viewer, and I think a few other people, even Moist Critical, who, you know, casually called it out, but Hero High and Moist and Vexed were two of the biggest voices against it that I followed, and I'd be like, hey, yeah, they bring up some legitimate points, and I guess they're almost like pariahs to the RWBY community. And I used to be heavily involved in the RWBY community. I no longer, for obvious reasons. I have better things to do. I have this thing, it's called a life. I have a job, right? I have a house to maintain. I have a dog to take care of. You know, I have things to do that don't involve RWBY. As much as I would love to sit on my phone all day and criticize people and, you know, say the DT word to people who dare criticize my dare RWBY, I have better things to do. I did want to rant about this show for a while now, and I wasn't sure exactly how to put it together, and this is kind of what I came up with. And I know it's not the most original thing, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to take a break from Resident Evil 4 because I finished the game. I finished it like 7 times by this point, and I'm going to make a review out of it, like a proper review. I just wanted to kind of do a quick put something together for you, the viewer, so you weren't tired of seeing me bitch about Leon and Ashley and shit. I love the game, by the way. It's fucking great. But this is just more of another thing I wanted to put together. I will continue with that. I've got Resident Evil 4 still going on. I'm gonna do the remake review. I've made it up to 121 people who are following me. And to you, 121, to whoever else who subscribes, thank you. You know, yeah, you have been instrumental to this whole project. This is more of just a side gig for me. Do I hope to do it full time? Yes, that'd be nice. But I'm also doing school on top of everything, which is going great, by the way, straight A's. And I want to make kind of like content that entertains. I'm not the biggest entertainer. I like to have fun with these projects, and that's why they're kind of my thing. If you have suggestions, obviously, I'll take them. I'll take a look, and if I've got time, I'll put something together. But thank you again so very much for watching. Don't worry, I've got a few more. I even got a Soulsborne game. Don't worry, you'll like that one. Meanwhile, have a good one, lads. Thank you.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.